The biker had been riding since dawn, the open road usually calming his restless mind. The steady roar of the engine was the only thing that made him feel in control. But that peace shattered when the bike suddenly coughed, sputtered, and died just past an abandoned bus stop on the edge of town. He kicked the stand down hard and swore under his breath. Dust hung in the air. The place looked forgotten. Cracked pavement, rusted signs, and a broken bench where time seemed to have stopped years ago. He wiped sweat from his forehead and knelt beside the bike, checking the engine with rough, impatient hands. That's when he felt eyes on him. Across the road stood a girl, no older than 16. She was thin, her jacket too big for her small frame, sleeves hiding most of her hands. Her shoes were worn through at the soles. A torn backpack rested at her feet like it held her entire world. She looked homeless, no doubt about it, but her eyes were sharp, focused, not begging like he was used to seeing. She stepped closer, slow and careful, as if afraid he might shout. "I can fix your bike," she said. The biker let out a short laugh without even looking up. "No way," he replied. "This machine costs more than you've probably ever seen." The girl didn't flinch. She stayed quiet, watching him struggle. He pulled at a cable, cursed again, and wiped grease on his jeans. The bike refused to cooperate. "You missed something," she said softly. That made him stop. He finally looked at her, annoyed. "And what would you know?" She pointed, hesitating for just a second. "Fuel line. It's loose. That's why it stalled." He followed her finger despite himself. There it was, slightly detached, easy to overlook if you were in a hurry. His jaw tightened. He hated that she might be right. "You mess with bikes often?" he asked sarcastically. She shrugged. "Enough." He stood up slowly, towering over her. For a moment, she looked small again, like a child who had learned too early how hard the world could be. He expected her to back away. She didn't. "Why help me?" he asked. She looked down at the ground. "Because I know how it feels when something you depend on just stops." The words hit him harder than he expected. He glanced at the road, then back at the bike. After a long pause, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a wrench. "One chance," he said, holding it out. "Don't break anything." Her eyes widened slightly, not with excitement, but with relief. She took the tool carefully, like it was something precious. As she knelt beside the bike, her movements were steady, practiced. This wasn't guesswork. The biker watched in silence, confused by the strange feeling growing in his chest. For the first time that day, the road didn't feel so empty, but he didn't yet know how much this moment was about to change both of their lives. The girl tightened the fuel line with quiet focus, her fingers moving with confidence that didn't match her age or appearance. The biker leaned against the seat, arms crossed, watching closely. He expected hesitation, mistakes, anything to prove his doubt right. Instead, she worked calmly, wiping her hands on the edge of her jacket like she had done this 100 times before. "Try it now," she said, stepping back. He hesitated, then turned the key. The engine coughed once, then roared back to life, steady and strong. The sound echoed through the empty road. The biker froze, staring at the bike like it had betrayed him by listening to her. He shut the engine off slowly and looked at the girl again. "Where did you learn that?" She shrugged, the way people do when the truth is heavier than they want to explain. "My dad," she said. "He was a mechanic. Used to say engines talk. You just have to listen." Something in her voice told him the man wasn't around anymore. He didn't ask why. He reached into his pocket and pulled out some cash, holding it out to her. "Here, for helping." She shook her head. "I didn't do it for money." That caught him off guard. "Then why?" She looked past him, toward the road stretching into nowhere. "Because if you're stuck, and someone can help, they should." He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. A moment later, he kicked the stand up, started the bike again, and rode off without looking back. The engine's sound faded, leaving the girl alone by the bus stop once more. But the road didn't let him forget. All the way through town, her words stayed with him. Engines talk. People do too, if someone's willing to listen. By nightfall, guilt settled heavier than exhaustion. He knew that bus stop, knew what kind of nights came with sleeping outdoors. The next morning, he turned the bike around. When he reached the bus stop, she was still there, sitting on the broken bench, hugging her backpack. She looked up, startled, when the familiar motorcycle rolled in. "I thought you'd be gone," she said. "I was," he replied. Then he handed her a paper bag. Food, warm, real. Her hands trembled as she took it. "I'm Mike," he added. "Lena." They talked while she ate. About bikes, about roads, about how she'd been fixing engines since she was 10, trading repairs for meals after her father passed away. When the sun dipped low, Mike made a decision that scared him more than any long ride ever had. "I've got a spare room," he said carefully. "Not fancy, but warm. You'd have rules, school, safety. Choice is yours." She didn't answer right away. Trust was something the world had taught her to ration. Finally, she nodded. Weeks later, Lena slept under a real roof. Months later, she was back in school. And every time Mike's bike needed fixing, she smiled, because the day he broke down was the day both of them finally found something they didn't know they were missing. Winter came slowly, turning the edges of the town gray and quiet. Lena had grown accustomed to waking up in a warm bed, brushing her teeth with clean water, and eating breakfast without wondering where her next meal would come from. At first, she had been cautious around Mike, unsure if this new life was real or just another fleeting moment of kindness she couldn't hold on to. But over time, she began to trust him, not just because he provided, but because he listened. He didn't ask her to explain everything at once, he just let her be. Mike, on the other hand, had never expected to care this much. He had always been a lone rider, a man who kept the road and his bike as his only constants. But Lena's presence shifted something inside him. Her laughter in the morning, the way she carefully tightened bolts on his bike, the sharp intelligence behind her quiet observations, all of it chipped away at his carefully built walls. He found himself watching her from the doorway, noticing how she organized her small corner of the room, how she smiled at small things, like a sparrow outside the window. One Saturday, he handed her the keys to his old truck. "Want to try driving it?" he asked, half joking, half serious. Lena's eyes lit up. She had never driven anything bigger than a bicycle before, but she didn't hesitate. Under Mike's patient guidance, she navigated the truck down the empty streets, laughing at her mistakes and marveling at her own progress. For the first time in years, she felt in control of more than just a broken engine. Evenings became their time to talk. They'd sit by the fire in Mike's small living room, sipping hot cocoa, sharing stories. Lena told him about her father, how he had taught her to respect machines as if they were alive, to never take shortcuts. Mike shared tales of the road, of towns he'd passed through, of moments when solitude was comforting, and also crushing. They found a rhythm together, one neither had expected but both needed. Then one afternoon, as Lena worked on repairing an old bicycle she had found discarded, Mike stood behind her, watching silently. "You know," he said, "I don't think you just fixed my bike that day. I think you fixed me too." Lena paused, her hands on the handlebars. She smiled softly, looking up at him. "Maybe we fixed each other," she replied. From that moment on, life settled into a quiet happiness. Lena wasn't just a girl with nowhere to go anymore, she was part of a home. Mike wasn't just a biker with an engine and an empty road, he was someone who had learned that trust, kindness, and a shared meal could change a life completely. The town watched them too, sometimes whispering, but it didn't matter. They had found each other when the world had seemed indifferent. And sometimes, that was enough to make a broken engine roar again, not just in the bike, but into spring arrived slowly, bringing color back to the town. Trees stretched their branches, flowers bloomed in cracks along the sidewalks, and the air smelled faintly of rain and earth. For Lena, it was the first spring she could remember without the gnawing fear of where she'd sleep or what she would eat. Each day brought something new, warm mornings, predictable meals, and, most importantly, a sense of belonging. Mike had noticed subtle changes in her over the past few months. She walked taller, spoke with more confidence, and even laughed freely now. It wasn't just the warmth of a roof above her head, it was the feeling of stability, of someone trusting her, believing in her. One afternoon, Mike suggested they fix up the small backyard. "Could be nice to have some flowers," he said, shrugging, as if it were no big deal. Lena's eyes lit up at the idea. Gardening had never been a part of her life, yet the thought of planting something and seeing it grow filled her with excitement. They spent the day clearing old weeds, planting bulbs, and laughing as soil spilled over their gloves. Mike joked about Lena being a mechanic of flowers now, and she smirked, throwing a handful of dirt at him in playful retaliation. While working, Lena found an old, broken bicycle tucked behind a shed. It reminded her of the bike she had fixed when she first met Mike. She ran her fingers over the rusted frame. "Maybe I can bring this one back too," she said, a spark of determination in her eyes. Mike watched her for a long moment. "You're unstoppable, you know that," he said softly. "I think you'd fix the whole town if you wanted to." She laughed, but her eyes softened. "I just want to help people. That's all." Over the next weeks, Lena began visiting local garages, asking small favors, learning, helping, and sometimes fixing old bicycles for neighborhood kids. Mike drove her to the places she needed to go, quietly supporting her without ever pushing. Lena was building a reputation now, not just as the homeless girl who could fix engines, but as someone skilled, reliable, and kind. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they sat together on the back porch. Mike handed her a cup of tea, and for a while, they just watched the town settle into evening quiet. "I never imagined it would be like this," Mike said quietly. "I thought I was helping you, but maybe you were helping me more." Lena smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "We found each other," she said simply. "And sometimes, that's enough." The world outside continued at its usual pace, indifferent in some ways, but within the walls of their small home and the little backyard garden, something beautiful had taken root. Two lives, once separate and uncertain, had grown together, not just by chance, but by choice, care, and quiet acts of trust. That night, as Lena lay in her bed, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. And for Mike, hearing her soft breathing from the next room, he realized that no road he had ever traveled mattered as much as the journey they were now taking together. Hearts finally learning to feel at home.